everyone. Welcome to FreeThinker's Fireside. My name is Helen, also known as House Bells, and this is the channel where we put the human and humanist one cozy chat at a time. Before I bring on my guests, me and David Fitzgerald are going to be part of a fundraiser on Monday, so I'm gonna shill for that. So I'm gonna go ahead and play that, and then we'll move on.
Join us on March 31st at 5:30 p.m. Central Time as we launch Secularizing US, a brand new nonprofit organization dedicated to connecting and supporting atheists, humanists, and secular people. We'll bring on a bunch of awesome guests and talk about all the cool things we already have planned for this year. So hang out with us as we build a home for secular people. Secularizing US, where secular people find their people.
Okay. Hi, Dave.
Yeah.
How are you?
Good. So it's actually Monday after next then that the secular marathon is.
Yes.
The 31st. Just
Did I say this Monday? I was mistaken. I know how to do dates.
It's a Monday.
It's a Monday. I was correct. It's a Monday. So yeah. So David, tell the people who you are and what you do and things.
My name is David Fitzgerald, and I'm probably best known for writing a book called Nailed and a follow-up book called Jesus Mything in Action, and all talking about making the argument that Jesus probably, almost certainly, I'm certainly convinced, never existed at all. And some of you are aware about that. Some of you don't know about my latest book, which is called Playing God, An Evolutionary History of World Religion. That makes the arguments that it's not just Jesus that has a dodgy backstory, but when you look at all the founder figures of all the world's top 10 major world religions, they all seem to have a dodgy backstory. So much so that now I think it's norm for major world religions start out with a purely imaginary founder figure. So that's sort of me in a nutshell.
Well, like we met through recovering from religion, and I've been very fascinated by the work you've done. Like I said, I have all three books, guys, of the newest book. I made it halfway through the first one. So I had a goal to at least finish this first book by the time you came on, and I failed. Yep. So at least I'm honest. At least I'm an honest host. So anyway, what inspired you to write this particular series of books?
Great question. Well, I've been an atheist for many years before it even occurred to me to look into the origins of Christianity. And if somebody had told me what I'm telling people now 25 years ago, I would just say, oh, that's crazy talk. And yet, as soon as you start trying to parse out what parts of the Gospels are the real Jesus and which are giving us just a fake legendary accretion that came later, trying to parse that out is a very slippery business. And about 2 years into that progress of trying to separate out the fact from fiction in that, I started thinking, okay, all these red flags are popping up, and I'm not the only one out there who's starting to shake their head, and certainly not the first or the best qualified to say that Jesus didn't exist at all. So that blew my mind. But one of the funniest side effects of looking into this whole Jesus probably didn't exist business is how many Buddhists would come up to me at conferences and say, oh, that's funny. We're having the same arguments in our circles about whether the Buddha exists or not. Having ex-Muslims come up to me at conferences and say, yeah, it's funny. We're having the same debates in our circles on whether Muhammad exists or not. And that one really blew my mind until they started saying, yeah, because this, and this. And all of a sudden, as they're giving their reasons for why they don't think Muhammad existed, I thought, oh, wow, this is sounding a lot like Jesus. So for Freedom from Religion Foundation and Recovery from Religion Foundation, I was preparing for a talk to do. And I thought, you know what? I'll be talking about, the problems with Jesus. I should look into the other top 10 world religions and just kick the tires and see if anybody else has a problematic backstory. And it turned out every single one of them.
They all have problems. They're all problematic backstories.
Absolutely. And yeah, and it's like it's not like we need them to be. I mean, we'll be atheists whether or not it was a real guy preaching reincarnation in 6th century BC China or not, but
Mhm.
or India rather. But the fact is, the more you look at them, the less it looks like these are real guys, and the more they all look like collaborative art projects, usually by people in power, and usually, if not created outright, promoted by people, generally a emperor or a king of a cosmopolitan empire, trying to unite their people together. And yeah, it's funny because religions, they all look so different, sound different, have different terminology, music, and everything. But when you look at their development and their evolution, they all start looking exactly alike, and they look like they're all created for the exact same reasons.
So, again, the ADHD is strong. What? Because so you probably wrote this in there, and either I haven't gotten to it yet, or I read it and I forgot.
And just a quick segue to introduce to the audience. You're so clever, Helen.
Yeah, I know, I am. Read the books, guys. So anyway, when. Oh, that's my question. Okay, there. Here it is. So, when you're doing your research, like what about not only world religions, but why do you think like emperors and kings and people that were setting up civilizations use religion to unite the people rather than just the people unite the people?
Gotcha. Well, I mean, you see different stages of evolutionary development, no matter what religion you're talking about. All world religions, from prehistory to pre-human times, even when we were just social animals, all the way up until you get these cosmopolitan empires in around that second half of the first millennium BCE, from roughly say 600 BC to around 100 or 200 CE. BCE. That time seems when we're mostly getting this development of city-states becoming, unified and solidified and consolidated as empires. And they're not just empires of one people, but they're multicultural. And so it's an easy way, and you see this traced throughout time in different parts of the world in different ways, that the gods, the more that you get, the more that their circle of concern increases. Like if you have tribe A and tribe B, maybe you have the same god, maybe you don't. But if you have culture A and culture B, they don't have the same language, they are in different parts of the world, they definitely don't have anything in common. But if you can make their god care for all of them, just like their emperor is the emperor of all of them, then it makes a lot of sense. It's much more cohesive to have a single religion.
So, because it is kind of the same thing. Like I always say, it's same salad, different dressing. Because it really is. It's all about having some sort of omnipresence that is kind of in charge of everything, and then you have like probably a narcissist that is saying like I am the bestower of truth.
Yes.
People.
And this is the god, and I'm related to the god, or I'm a son of the god, or I am a god. So you need to follow me like you would a god. And this is a development that didn't start out that way. In the earliest forms of religion, you don't see that. But as religion progresses and as societies get bigger and bigger and more cosmopolitan, more variegated, you do start to see gods shape in a different way. Gods become more transcendent, more above it all, not just the god of the river, or the god of the mountains, or the god of this or that, the gods of everything. And they become farther and farther away, and all the lesser gods in other religions become like the middleman, middle market. They become archangels or angels, or divine messengers. And they all do it slightly differently, but it's very interesting to see the process. It's all very similar.
It tends to be, I don't know what it is about human evolution that thought like this is a good idea. I can understand like kind of like pre-religion.
Yeah.
Like pre-religion, I understand like people didn't have an explanation for how things be. Like I get that.
Yeah.
But the and like and proto like I'm sorry, and apes in the Stone Age, like they're already starting to find patterns. Like there's been proto religions shown in like ape
Right.
cultures,
Yeah.
and tribes, which is really interesting.
Very
So
interesting.
I guess it's an evolutionary part of the brain that we're like we're trying to find the pattern and make sense out of a
Right.
chaotic world.
Right. And you can see like people like Daniel Dennett and David Sloan Wilson have done a really good job of illustrating these survival mechanisms, these evolutionary survival mechanisms before we had language, before we were human, but we had an inclination to sense things are there, even whether there's something there or not. It's called an overactive agency detector, because it's better to be wrong about there not being a tiger than to be wrong about a tiger who is there, if that makes sense.
Right.
So it's safer to be a little more paranoid about that and see faces in clouds, think there's ghosts when you see a grass rattling, that kind of thing. And we see how these evolutionary survival mechanisms, and there's lots of them that we can talk about, they all get co-opted by religions in some form or another down the line. It's fascinating, just really fascinating.
And like I said before, about how in the past it makes sense. We were trying to find patterns. We were trying to make sense of our environment. But living in the 21st century and still believing in sky gods is strange.
It's a little strange. But I mean,
it's a little strange.
Our brains are not that different than what they were, 200,000 years ago, 500,000 years ago.
Yeah.
But it's our culture evolution that's changed. And in some ways we've make amazing strides. And in some ways we're right back there in the Stone Age, and, it can slip back in no time at all. It all depends on how much we're training our critical thinking, how much we're really looking at for causes and the scientific method, rather than just falling back on superstition and for lack of better.
Well, like I was just laughing my butt off when I was reading about I think it was in the Loon Ting dynasty about the guy with the turtle shells.
Yes.
That was insane. I was like, tell the people what I'm talking about.
One of the oldest forms of writing we have are these things called oracle bones, where the Chinese would write, fortunes on like turtle shells, for instance, or shoulder bones, and then they would put them on fire, crack them, and see what came out of that, and that's how they would determine what their ancestors were trying to tell them, or what this or that god was trying to tell them. And we see crazy stuff. It makes sense to a certain point,
Yeah.
And I make that point, like when we start out where there is no religion, the first step is getting a shaman, somebody who says, oh, there's gods out there, and I can be the middleman for you, and I can, talk to you. If you got a problem, I'll talk to the gods for you. That's where religion gets its start. And some people like to claim that's the beginning of science. Is it though? It's definitely trying to make sense of the world, but it's doing so in a way that, well, let's listen to this guy who claims to speak for the gods and all.
Well, yeah. Why listen to yourself?
Yeah. And at the same time, they're like observing the stars in the skies and the change of seasons, things like that. So there is proto-scientific things going on, but it's a neck and neck race with religion and science, early religion, early science.
Or the religion feeds the science.
If you're not using a scientific method, you can't really call it science.
Well,
and there's a limit to there's a limit to what they do.
This is what I'm saying. Because when we started having where we could actually map stars and planets and think about the natural world. Yeah. I think I'm not saying they understood the planets, rotated, around the sun, and stars also navigated the sky, and they started putting patterns together. But that led to
they thought everything was revolving on us, for instance. But
that's true. Yeah. So eventually, I'm sorry, yeah, I forgot about that. That happened in the Middle Ages. My bad. Anyway, so but they were trying to understand the natural world,
Right.
and there was like this early understanding that there's more to this than just us existing on this planet. There's a wider, and that's why we have mythologies and stories, and
Exactly.
where day and night comes from, and seasons and all that shit.
All these things.
What's interesting about it is the fact that just by doing those early observations and thinking about those things, like eventually, the predecessors, the people that came after, were developed that critical mind and go, oh wait, hold on, oh, there's other galaxies, there's other, and the universe is huge and all that stuff.
All these series of steps. But one of the most interesting things I found, especially about the shaman stage, is how much they are like magicians now and faith healers now. It's like we're using the same tricks and con jobs that they were using in the Stone Age. And they were just as ruthless about exposing fakes as we are today.
Yeah, and
yeah,
exactly. So
Sky. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, and but it's really interesting because when, like, the perspective of this whole thing about how people say, like, like, yes, I do find it weird that we live in the 21st century and we still believe in sky gods. It's very, like, now that I've left religion, I'm like, this is just silly. But I also understand it as almost like an evolutionary adaptation that we kind of developed as people. I always say, like, our brains are the same pretty much. Yeah. It's just that we just got more tools. We started developing technologies,
and we're standing on the shoulders of giants, too. Right. Yeah, but Lord knows we could slip right back into the dark ages, and we're seems like we're really trying hard to do it right now. So all the more reason to keep lighting that candle of science.
Sorry, Frankenstein. I hate to tell you. You have a stick.
It's not totally useless. It's probably just useful in other ways than you.
Yeah, other ways. Yeah.
You can
use it for kindling, and you can use it to poke things.
Yes.
So, what was the most interesting when you were doing this research? What was like one or two like really interesting things that you didn't know that kind of was you're like.
There were several things, and in fact, I had been working on. I don't know if you've seen my talk about sex and violence in the Bible. It's called Sexy Violence, Violent Sex, the Weird Ass Morality of the Bible. I was in the middle of turning that into a book when all of a sudden we had all these really, really interesting developments in early Judaism and early Islam. And it blew my mind so much that I stopped working on that book and immediately started working on this one. Because the origins of Judaism, for instance, is about 1,000 years younger than we've always expected it to be. And over time, it's really been interesting to see how, like, for instance, the writing of the first 5 books, the books of Moses, if you will, originally, we all thought they were written in Moses's time, which was maybe 1,600 years BC, maybe 1,200 BC. Nobody really has been able to pin down when Moses was supposed to have existed. But we said, oh, it was written then. And then, well, no, it's probably written during the United Monarchy of David and Solomon. And then that idea has fallen out of popularity, mainly because it doesn't look like those guys had a kingdom. There was no kingdom of United Monarchy. I'm saying, when'd you get to book 2?
I can't wait for book 2.
Babylonian exile, and they said, well, no, it looks like it's even later than that. It looks like it's in the Hellenistic time, the Alexander the Great's time. So Judaism turns out to be about 1,000 years younger than we thought. And at the same time, this is based mostly on the book work of Russell Gmerkin, who's done textual research. But at the same time, he's making this argument that, we don't have any evidence for Moses before the 4th century BCE. We don't have any evidence for David and Solomon. Israel Finkelstein and Neil Asher Silberman have been saying that for 25 years now. That the evidence we have for it fits in a shoebox, and none of it is a dead cert. It's all inconclusive. At the same time, Jonathan Adler, this Tel Aviv archaeologist, just dropped a bombshell just a few years ago when he argued that archaeologically, we have no evidence for the practice of Judaism before sometime in the 3rd or 2nd century BCE, which tracks exactly with what Russell Merkin is saying. And that as late as the 5th century, and when you get in the second half of book 1, you'll be seeing some of this, and you get book 2, you'll see a lot more of this. But as late as the 5th century, there were we have a century's worth of correspondence, documents, court cases of a Jewish colony in Egypt where they don't know anything about Moses. They don't know anything about the 12 tribes. They don't know anything about how to celebrate Passover. They know about the temple in Jerusalem, and they're on good terms with the temple in Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. They have their own temple at a time when you're only supposed to have the temple in Jerusalem. And yet, not only are they not, heretics, they're not, some land that time forgot scenario. They are on regular good terms with the temple in Jerusalem, who has no problem with them worshiping not just Yahweh, who they called Yah, but Yahweh's wife and 3 other gods, at least 5, and maybe more. And they have no problem.
Are you saying they were pagan?
I'm saying they were polytheistic with a capital P. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the whole Deuteronomistic history that we get in the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible, it's clearly we would not recognize Judah or Israel today from the stories that we get in the Bible, because they act as if the Jews somehow keep getting amnesia and forgetting that there's only one God that helps them, and going back into paganism. There was paganism all the time. There was no conquest of Canaan. There was no escape out of Egypt. There was no exodus out of Egypt. All these were written way after the fact, and again, hundreds of years after the fact. Back when they were coming back from Persian exile and resettling into these areas. But the Jews, the Canaanites, the Israelites, they were all Canaanites, all of those Canaanites, the Phoenicians, all these tribes were very interconnected to each other, very interrelated, basically the same Semitic peoples in different tribes.
Is that why the First Testament in the Bible is so focused on tribal warfare?
So yeah,
because there's a lot.
They've taken all these stories that were probably originally about either local gods or local, father figures of these individual tribes, and they slapped it all together into one long family epic. So it's all, and that's why you see the same stories kind of rebounding about the patriarchs. It's like, oh, that's funny that Abraham did this, because this over here it happens again to Jacob and he does that, and it's like, because these are all stories told in different areas of Judah and Israel and Midian and Ammon and Edom, all these different regions, and they've all become brought together and then put into this huge multi-generational historical epic that has almost nothing to do with reality. To the point where everybody in the Old Testament, from Abraham to Solomon, none of those guys appear to have existed. And if any of them did, it's almost by accident we're hearing their stories in the Bible, because the stories in the Bibles don't have anything to do with anybody who really actually existed.
Sidebar.
Sure.
That's not really a sidebar because you mentioned Solomon. I was watching I think I was watching a documentary. And this was keep in mind this was 4 months, maybe 4 or 5 months ago. So the memory isn't that great. But they were talking about the wealth of Solomon. Because he was supposed to be the richest king in Israel and blah 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 blah.
Oh, not just Israel. He was the whole world was shipping.
Yeah, but how big is the world?
Yeah. It's and funny thing is, no one outside of the Bible seems to have known about that. No one's noticed.
Right. That. So
we don't get Israel and Judah don't get on the map until 100 years after the time that those guys were supposed to have been around. And ironically enough, one of the few people in the Old Testament who is real, and we know is real, is the most hated woman in the Old Testament, Jezebel, her and her husband Ahab,
because she really likes sex, and they don't like that.
Right. and that's the unforgivable sin that she causes. And so they write all this shit about her.
A powerful woman that likes sex can't have that. That's not good.
Manipulating men, controlling men. Oh no, can't. Yeah,
no.
Throw her from the window. We cannot have that. So who knows?
That's what I like to say. I'm a woman.
Yeah.
That's because I have that. We have that watering room thing,
Yes.
and we can't make decisions. Something.
What do they say in Islam? Woman has 9 parts of desire, and men only has 1 part. Yeah,
exactly.
Women, and foreign women.
Yeah.
Oh, foreign and evil. That's like double evil in the Old Testament.
Yeah. So you add the racism and on top of.
For sure. And it's so funny when you see the Bible against the Bible, like the stories of Ezra and Nehemiah, which are bullshit stories for starters. Somebody in the Bible didn't like them so much they wrote the story of Ruth, another bullshit story, but it is it's directly written in opposition to the stuff that's going on in Ezra and Nehemiah.
So go because when
small children. That's
right. Because when I was talking, I think about Solomon, which I found really interesting, was like they were talking about his wealth might have been like copper, or it wasn't even like gold or silver.
we found
because like copper mines in
Israel, and we found traces
Israel.
of Egyptian copper mines for sure, but it wasn't Solomon's. It was either before or after, but during the time that it was meant to be Solomon. Yeah, this is not what was happening.
Interesting.
Yeah,
because I just thought that was interesting because like obviously I'm gonna read the books and become smarter, but big brain goals. But I just found, so even within, because they had some like academics and people and archaeologists that were looking at this, but I think they were coming from the end, like looking for things to confirm the
like the whole
conclusion.
The whole 20th century of biblical archaeology is big circular exercises of like, hey, we found these ruins. Bible says this, it must be that, Hey, look, the Bible's confirmed, and it turns out something completely different. But that, it's a completely wrong time. Well, but everyone's still convinced the Bible is given the real history, and it's like, no, dude, no. And
no.
There's been such a sea change just in the last 50 to 30 years, especially during the 80s and 90s, but it just keeps getting pushed back further and further and further, or I should say closer and closer to be younger and younger.
Because I think what is the oldest settlement that they found where they found, like, I can't remember where it was, but I found this really.
There's archaeologically, there's all kinds of things going back to the Neolithic age.
Yeah, there was.
Yeah, and
there was one where. Oh, go ahead. I'm listening. Go ahead.
There's standing stones, and there's like Stonehenge type equivalents, in the Holy Land for sure. The thing is, these are coming from older civilizations, and they're not. They don't match up the story we get in the Bible. Is all I'm trying to say. Things like the story of Ai, which just means ruins. Story of Jericho. It's like Jericho's walls didn't fall down because they didn't have walls. That kind of thing. It's that kind of archaeological thing. Somebody in the thing just said something about Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. I mean, that's a little far afield from where we're talking about, but yeah, absolutely. Melanie does a Monty Python joke.
Oh, the holy hand grenade.
3 shall be the number of counting.
I haven't watched that movie in a while. I may have to watch it this weekend. It's
brilliant.
I love that movie.
That and Life of Brian, just too awesome.
Yeah. Oh my God. I didn't. So I watched the Holy Grail, I think, like when I was college age, because that's your initiation.
Yes.
And then I showed it to my kids when they were like in like junior high school.
Yeah.
And my son loves it.
Yay.
What?
I feel like junior high is the exact perfect time to introduce somebody to Monty Python,
Yeah, I feel like it's the perfect time. like you watch, like, and I show them clips of, like, you know, the old episodes, and it's kind of like introducing your child to Doctor Who. There's, like, as a good parent, there's certain things you introduce your children to, you know, Star Wars, Monty Python, Doctor Who, like, that's what you do. So, but what's really okay, so it's very interesting because, like, the whole thing about, like, people wanting their like the history to fit an idea, rather than where the evidence will go, because we have, you know, religious scholars with an end, because we all know there's rigorous religious scholars that are believers.
Right.
They look at the actual history and are trying to decipher, like, what the truth is.
Yeah.
They have faith, but they also realize that people are flawed,
Right.
and also that you have to go what, you know, history actually shows.
And it's really,
and then there's other people that don't.
That's right. And you see that tension between, especially, it's kind of heartbreaking for when you have religious biblical scholars, and they're like, you know, 500 years ago, no one was saying there was no Adam and Eve. It's like, I think, you know, even 100 years ago, no one really believed there was an Adam and Eve. I'm probably being too generous, but it's like when biblical scholars now, when they talk about biblical history, they don't go to Adam and Eve. They don't go to the flood of Noah. They don't go to the Tower of Babel. It's like they just kind of gloss over all that and aim for somewhere Abraham, you know, and treat that. But I mean, the Bible's, it's all presented as history, you know, so it's hilarious that you can see that even though they won't admit it out loud, they realize, well, we're just gonna start over here, and they've been backing away from that ever since. And it's funny to see the ones that are cleaning with both hands, clawing and saying, no, there was a Noah's Ark, no, there was a kingdom of Solomon and David, you know, and the
they
ones that
found Noah's Ark. It's on a mountain in Turkey.
The division that's gone in search of Noah's Ark has found Noah's Ark. That's the problem.
Yeah, exactly. It's there.
Yeah. Funny.
Oh, like, you know what's really funny? It's called I think it's called Haldren's Wall, which is the wooden wall, like because it's like wooden Stonehenge. I think it's called.
Which one is this? The wooden one?
Yeah,
nothing to Hadrian's Wall in Scotland.
Hadrian's Wall. I said it wrong.
That's not wooden. I think you think there's some other wooden structure you're thinking of, and I can't think what it's called.
I'm getting my monuments confused. Probably.
So,
it's all getting meshed together in my brain.
Yeah, but I mean, it's the fact that there's all kinds of crazy Neolithic things all over the world, especially in the Holy Land and in Europe, and we've just scratched the surface of all these ancient. What is this? I don't understand. You can be a religious scholar if you read the Bible. It's odd. It is. And honestly, I'm right there with you. There comes a point where, the Clergy Project is proof of this. It's like you can learn so much about religion, you realize, yeah, this can't possibly be true. This can't possibly be scientifically accurate. And you see the way they go through the mental gymnastics of, oh, well, this is a beautiful metaphor. Oh, well, this is poetry. Oh, this is something, but it didn't really actually happen. And or maybe it happened, but you know, we'll never know. But you know, it's just, yeah. But let's pretend it did happen, because the Bible says
because I grew up Catholic, and we can say some shit about the Catholic Church, but they do admit that a lot of the Bible is allegory. They don't take it literally, and they have a science department. So
they have what choice? So yeah, 1
point for the Catholics.
Right, we're not going to burn you to death anymore for saying this. You know.
Yeah, you know, because we had people there. We had an Inquisition, and also we had people that were like, "Hey, you're wrong," and we eventually had to relent. So, 0.1 for the Catholics, by the way. Everything else, they suck. They're terrible, but I'll give them the point.
They're not the worst. They're not the worst.
That's why I never had a problem like as I grew up Catholic, that I never had a problem like with science, because it was just, I had science class and I had religion class when I even in Catholic school. So
well, what did they teach about biology and evolution and
they taught us biology and evolution. But they said that God,
theistic evolution,
God set it forth, and like that's at least like from a belief sort of perspective reasonable. Like
it's like have your cake and eat it kind of the way. It's like they can't deny evolution, so they have to make room for God in it.
We have to have an apologetic for it. So, which is, but at least like when you're, a believer, that's a little bit easier to swallow. Rather than, if you come from like one of these new American religions, like fundamentalism, Baptists, or, these, other religions, non-denominational, which says that like, no, it's only 6,000 years old.
Yes.
And, it's like, but what?
Yeah. And now we've got flat eartherism making a comeback, which blows my mind. And just, there's just a vein in my head that's just for that.
Can I tell you a funny sidebar flat earth story so during the plague, I was spending a lot of time on Discord, and
the most recent plague, you mean the COVID?
Yeah, the most recent plague. Gotcha. Yeah, the COVID plague. Not the white supremacist plague we're dealing with, the measles. like I'm talking about COVID.
Right.
So I spent a lot of time in Discord, and a person that runs a server for people that are flat earthers, and he has scientists on the server that try to help debunk people and get them out of flat earth. Okay.
Yeah.
So he was on Truth Wanted, and I happened to be modding that night, and then I met him, and he invited me to his server, and I kind of like listened to a little bit, and I was like, okay, like people are trying to do it through like science, but I'm like, let me explain this from a psychological perspective, because that's my background. And I was explaining about like motivated reasoning and logical fallacies, also like how the brain works, like how our emotions trick us, how we can feel things are right, using logic, and how our brains just really, really want to be right, and we don't want to believe we are fooled. And one, I'm a woman speaking, so keep that in mind. And this is mostly men
that are over this.
Yeah. So this guy goes, this is what he said to me. He goes,
"Oh dear.
No, you seem very nice, and you seem convinced of your argument, but I've been brainwashed by the college education system."
Big science.
And I know. Yeah. And I'm just denying the truth, and I don't want to see what's directly in front of my face.
What? So here's my question. I just want to jump in. It's like, why do they think there's a big who's making money off of
sell more globes?
Like, what? Yeah. What? Yeah.
I don't understand. Because then because they complain about NASA. That seems like we'll go back to what we're talking, but this all leads to the same sort of idea. This all leads to the same sort of thing, is that somebody, if college professors could brainwash anyone, they would do their homework. Fair. And Scott knows, because he teaches college math. so he knows. But it's one of those things.
To this country there.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, Scott was on last week. We talked about lazy thinking when he was on last week. Yeah. So what's really funny is that like when you it's all the same stuff. It's this idea that I have the correct answer, and they want to bring it down to faith, but because there are plenty of people out there that believe in gods, but no, like the basic fact that the earth is a spheroid. They know this. Nothing would work as far as our technologies and everything else if it was not a spheroid. And they went to the Antarctica and found out there's a 24-hour sun.
Thank you. And it's like the same thing, evolution. It's like nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution. So as somebody who's like fully on board with science, fully on board with evolution, when I hear people talk
He's
about
here.
Jesus mythicism as like creationism for atheists, it's like, oh, there goes that vein in my head again. It's like, dude, you know, comparing the dodgy backstory of a religious founder figure to flat eartherism, it's not even apples and oranges. That's rocks and plants. It's just it floors me, which is why I went from writing Nailed, which is sort of just a very skimmy top 10 ways that the official story of Jesus doesn't cut the water, to writing Jesus, Myth in Action, saying, well, look, and here's the citations, here's the footnotes, here's where we're coming with that, and this is where it looks like Christianity really came from. Completely different response to that. When Nailed came out, the thing that surprised me the most was that atheists were saying, oh no, that's crazy talk. When Myth in Action came out 7 years later, it's like, oh yeah, I never thought there was a Jesus. It's like the response to them was completely night and day. Yeah, I love it.
This is the thing. Like, even if there was a Jesus, it doesn't prove miracles, and they don't like that because I could make, like, listen, I could say that, you know, on Saturday nights when there's a full moon, and you know and Jupiter's in the second house, I could snap my fingers and make fire, you know, and I can say that, you know, and somebody can put it in a book, you know, but doesn't make it true, you know. So, and I think that's the rub, because even back, like even back when people believed in shamans, it's this idea that, well, it's the sunk cost fallacy. Like, I'm investing, you know, energy and ideas into this, that it has to be true.
Right. And I think to some extent, I mean, as atheists, we fall into that too. It's like, oh no, I'm sure there was a Jesus. He just wasn't Son of God. He was just an average dude. And it's like, there's nothing implausible about that. Sure, there could have been. It's just that when we look at the evidence, when we look at the textual evidence we have for Jesus and this historical evidence we have for Jesus, it doesn't point to that direction. It points as something was literary right out of the box and coming from these other places. Not even a conglomeration of guys who actually existed, but a complete construction. And again, that's not even important. It's only important if Jesus matters. And if Jesus doesn't matter, who gives a rat's ass? But what was, for me personally, what does make this argument worth having is that everything we learn in the back and forth between the people who insist there was a Jesus and the people who insist there wasn't a Jesus, everything we learn in that back and forth helps us better debunk all the people on the Christian side who say, oh yeah, there was a Jesus, and this is how he wants you to vote, this is how he wants you to think, this is how he wants you to behave. At best, there isn't a Jesus anymore, because everything we think we know about him comes from these sources that are allegorical, probably, but they're certainly not based on anyone who actually existed. People who love Bart Ehrman, I love Bart Ehrman, who insists that there was a Jesus. When he was debating recently on, can we trust the New Testament on the historical Jesus, it sounded like I was debating these guys, because he and I were exactly on the same page about how, yeah, if there was a Jesus, this is not the Jesus there was. And
so, since I haven't gotten to the second book, where did that current concept of Jesus come from?
Okay. In a nutshell, I think I agree with those the historians who say it came from the mystery faiths, which was a religious movement that started it started long before Alexander the Great, but it was very popular after his empires took hold and his successor empires. It was where they would take for instance, a Persian god or a Thracian god, or, you know, whichever Egyptian, whatever region we're talking about, and they would turn these long-standing existing deities, they'd reboot them as savior deities. And a savior deity didn't live up on Mount Olympus or on some sacred height somewhere. They lived in your heart, and they walked with you and talked with you, and they would help you. You know, you'd have secret rituals like baptisms or Lord's Suppers, and they would help you overcome troubles in your life. And they conquer death in some ways, so they help you get to an afterlife as well. They're all slightly different, but they're pretty. That's the template that works on all of them. And to deny that Christianity was one of them, you have to like be so hyper specific that nothing qualifies as a mystery faith.
That's so interesting. Like it's so fascinating.
Yeah, it is.
Because like,
I was just going to say, it nothing points to a single time and place where this came up. You have the further you go back, the more you see different Jesus movements and people talking about Jesus in different ways. Paul's Jesus is very different from the Jesus of after the Gospels are written.
I'm convinced Paul was the original incel.
He was definitely incel. Closet case, I would argue for sure. But
closet ace, or
yeah,
he like women did not like him.
Yeah, he's an interesting.
And he was all mad because he couldn't get laid, and then he was like, "I'm just going to make a whole religion around the fact." Until Jesus was like, "No, you have to be celibate."
He didn't invent Christianity. We need to keep that in mind. There was Christianity before him. There were Christian movements, and he complains about them too, because some of them are teaching another Jesus, another gospel. Don't listen to them. Don't take the Lord's Supper from them.
Why did his particular gospel catch on so much? Like I know, like okay, the Catholic Church, fine, but like it had to be because it was pre the Catholic Church when these writings were done, correct? Right. So why did that catch on?
We don't know that it did catch on during his lifetime.
Okay,
it was probably not till the 2nd century. There was an arch heretic called Marcion, who wrote his own New Testament before we wrote any of our New Testament. In fact, that's what spurred us to write our New Testament, is that this heretic guy had created this collection of scriptures. And one of the scriptures, he liked Paul a lot. He didn't like what he saw in the rest of early Christianity. And so it's weird that of that whole 1st century of Christianity, almost all our writings comes from this one dude who's not an apostle. He's not one of the 12 disciples. But he's the one that half our, a huge chunk of the New Testament is from, or if not from him, it's forged in his name. So it's a very weird thing, that this is the guy and nobody else. What happened? There's a whole century of Christian writings that we just have not survived. We don't know anything about. And what he was preaching probably was a lot like what the authors of the book of Hebrews was preaching, this heavenly Christ who was up in space and in the 7th heavens and was doing his thing all up there, and only came down by speaking to people like apostles. For Paul, an apostle was somebody like him who had a vision of Jesus. He never calls the apostles Jesus' disciples. He never uses the word disciples ever in any context, let alone says that Jesus had 12 of them. And the only overlap we have between who we think of as Jesus' disciples are the guys who were the head of the Jerusalem church, whose names became attached to our disciples. But to him, they're these guys in Jerusalem, and he doesn't even think they're real Christians. He thinks they're kind of bullshit Christians, and he's opposing them constantly. In Galatians, he has a big fight to Peter face to face. And he brags about things like, I didn't give in to them for a second,
Wow, and we're still saying, like, who's a real Christian?
Right.
Wow, it hasn't changed.
And these are supposed to be the guys that was Jesus's friends and family. And like that one verse about, I didn't see any apostles, I only saw James, the brother of the Lord. It's like, well, if you really think he's your brother, Jesus' brother, why is it just a few verses later you're acting like these are all fake Christians and opposing them? Navi, here's the thing about Navi, the 12 disciples of the brains, 12 crows, and maybe, but I don't think so, because I think the 12 comes from it being a sacred number to the Israelites. It turns out that idea is not even that old. And it only goes to about the 4th century. And there's all kinds of astrological connections you can make. There's all kinds of other, you take a number and you can run with it in all these different ways, and you see that. But those are later developments, and they don't start that way. So yeah,
So
everything
so
we don't know what Christianity originally looked like because everything we have comes generations after the fact.
because it was done in like, these little tribes, right, where people were moving from a slow evolution of going from, polytheistic belief, and then down through time and moved to
Well, it's not.
sort of
We're not going
proto poly, but
I mean, there
and
was that
mono.
going on, but when we're talking about Christianity, we're talking about a much later thing. We're
Yeah.
talking about the first century, and by then you got people in big cities, Roman Empire. We're not. It's not a tribal thing at all, really. And it's
Wasn't okay. All right.
Yeah, by that time.
Like I said, I haven't made it to the second book yet.
There you go. Yeah. I can't wait. I can't wait for you to get into those books because
I like the pagan shit is like my jam. Because like pagans are. That's a trip.
Yeah.
Pagan religions are a trip. But sure. I'm very excited to get into the second book because it's especially what you said about like writing seems to be the big kickoff for people like really once we had civilization, people actually had time to sit down and write something.
Exactly.
They're not being chased by tigers. That we had the time to kind of contemplate these things. Which is,
and it's interesting how. I was going to say, like in China, they did it differently. In Egypt, they did it differently. In all these different parts of the world, they were all doing the same things, but they were putting their own spin on it, and that's really interesting to me too. They were getting further and further away from like ancestor gods and tribal gods, and into a transcendent, super god. But they all did it in their own ways. Greeks did it by philosophy. Chinese did it by Confucianism and legalism. So yeah, there's just. It's fascinating to see it all come together.
Well, and this is the thing, like I keep, kind of harping on is that religion is always a reflection of culture.
For sure.
And the psychological state of the people in that particular culture.
Yeah.
Like I've been, for example, I'm listening to Behind the Bastards. It's a great podcast, highly recommend. And I'm listening to this really weird story about like this little cult that was formed on rationalism and creating a great, but like the thing is though, it's like AI is the new God. We're going to make this really kind AI that is going to be super cool to trans people, vegan, and transform us into dragons. But the thing is, though, like this little tiny cult started to murder people.
No.
Yeah. So that happened, and this is only a few years ago. This was only like 2017, 2018.
Oh, wow.
But and this is the thing, like. Everybody's looking for a God. And if we're not going to have a supernatural God, we'll have a technological God. And we got to make sure the God is really nice because we're just going to feed. But it also gets into Christian nationalism, white supremacy stuff. It's great. It's totally gross. Not a fan. But I highly recommend. But and also there's a Harry Potter fanfic associated with this cult. You have to listen to this. It's insane. But this is the thing, like. Even in early history, like people are constantly trying to find answers, whether it be, a sky daddy or AI. Like it. Yeah. It's fascinating.
It is. And the funny thing is in the beginning, they had this feeling that there are all these gods, all these different gods of everything, little gods, big gods, no gods. But they didn't try to worship them. There was no interaction between them. They were spirits that, ran the whole show, but we didn't try to influence them or worship them in either way. And that's fascinating how we got from that idea to where we're slaves of the gods, basically, and we belong to the gods. And it's like all the effed up ways that religion can be used to oppress people. So whenever you say, "Oh, is religion a force for good or a force for evil?" the answer is, "Oh, yes, clearly, it's both, and it's both all the time."
Right.
Yeah.
It's, and well, that's anything. Like if you like.
Sure.
Like atheism, is kind of the basis of rationalism, which led to weird cult shit. So, There we go. It's just about her. Like, you can just, anything can be the basis for, you can justify anything, whether good or bad, depending on the person's motivations, because everything's emotion.
Yeah. And what they say about atheists, hurting cats, it's so true.
I abuse all 3 of the cats live in my house, and the foster we're doing. So all 4 of them are terribly tortured with treats and pets, and
we have the same problem.
It's awful.
Yeah, I feel your pain.
And I tell them they're dumb fuck-faced kitty cats, and and they just look at me
howling for me because I'm not feeding them right now or something. But anyway, there's
I am a good food slave. I am very good. I'm a good cat slave. I am. But like, it is really interesting how over time, like, this hasn't really changed. We're still like, the religions have changed, and the evolution, like, again, culture, psychology, they feed each other, but everybody is still trying to have some sort of answer to existence. And I wonder if it's because people don't know how to process death, or is it like, is that part of
it? I had a friend, atheist friend of mine, who was in hospice when he was dying, and he said, "You know what? You wouldn't believe it, Dave, but all the Christians in here are terrified of death." And it's like, wait, I thought it was supposed to be the other way around, And it really struck me, is that in their bones they know that it's just make believe, and that does not give them comfort at the end of their life. Which I would assume that if religion was good for anything, it would be good for that. But it's not necessarily true. So go figure.
Well, like, when my dad passed away in July, I was the only atheist, so I just accepted that I got 47 years with my dad, and that's all I got. And I'm very, and he is wherever he is, great. He's Adams, cool. But my brothers didn't know how to, as religious people, didn't know how to handle it, because I was not the one that thought that we would see each other again.
Gotcha.
And I think that's hard for people to grasp, but also at the same time, like, somebody compared death to being like, well, if there's life after death, that means that your friend went on vacation, but they don't have their cell phone. Like, that's what it is. Like, you just can't communicate with them. And I'm like, that's kind of like the metaphor, because if you believe that there's some kind of life after existence, like, your friend is still alive, they just don't have their cell phone. So why would you be sad? And I'm like, that's like, if you think about it in that, like, very bare bones way of thinking.
Sure.
And I think that, because, like, my dad said, like, when we had a conversation like a month before he passed, I went to go visit him, and he goes, "I know you don't believe." And I said, no, because I go, "Dad, there's no way we can know what happens." And he goes, "You're right, but I choose to believe." Because I made a promise to my best friend that we would meet each other at the pearly gates, but he chooses to believe it, and that's more honest than someone saying, like, you have to believe this is true. Like, and we came to, like, this meeting of the minds where I was like, and I said and I told my dad, I go, "I hope it's true, because that means you and I get to see each other again." But I go, but there's no way to know, so I'm just in the I don't know camp.
Gotcha. Well, I like, and my dad, before he died, one of my cousins asked him, said, "Uncle Glenn, do you really believe in all that Southern Baptist stuff?" And he said, "Well, I think it's important." And I thought that was really interesting. I'm so glad she told me that, because people who believe in belief, even if whether they believe in it or not, I think there's a lot more believers out there who are just going around not because they believe it, but because they think it's a good thing to believe in it. And they have, I'd like to say that most believers I know are believers for good, rational, real reasons that have absolutely nothing to do with their religion being good or rational or real. But they got the safety.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
well, just in case, it's like Pascal's wager,
Well,
just in case, and I'm just like, okay, and that's what I find so interesting about these evolutions of religion, because I think at first they were trying to understand nature and their place in the cosmos, especially when we got to higher thinking, when that prefrontal cortex and big brain stuff and all the gray matter started to happen, that we could contemplate that. And then it moved to, well, you get an afterlife, and you get because I think in early evolution, when we didn't have science to explain how the body dies and what happens to the brain and all that stuff, we didn't have that. So I can understand the urge to put, especially since grief wasn't really as a process. There's no therapist back there to help you go through help you deal with your grief.
Their rituals were their therapy. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that was their therapy. Yeah, and that's the way to process. That's why we have funerals and wakes and celebrations for people's lives, because that helps us deal with that process.
Yeah,
and it's healthy. This closure, we need to do those things. But at the same time, that doesn't mean they're sky gods.
This is the thing. Yeah, this is the thing. When I am, death is not. When death is, I am not. So why should I fear death?
Well, my kids, it is one of those things. It's going to be before I was born.
Exactly.
And it's going to be the same after.
Exactly. Yeah. What's that Mark Twain quote? It was, I was dead for billions of years before I was born.
Yeah.
He convinced me. Yeah. I'm more afraid of not living than I am of dying, because everything.
Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of. I feel like I got shit to do. There's shit I gotta do before I kick myself off. I want to be where my dad was, where he was once he knew that his family was safe, my mom had moved into a really nice nursing home. Yeah. He was okay, I can let go of this mortal coil. I want to get to that point, know, because he for 2 months before he died, he just stopped eating. He was, he was just letting go. And I, because he was I'm done. And I want to get to that point where I'm just I've done enough,
Yeah. Yeah.
And and that's why I find religion so fascinating, because it is the need to explain. The need to explain something of what we don't know, and what religion looks like, especially is in the new world, when we have these new religions like Mormonism, which is pretty recent, which is a new take on Christianity that comes from a religion that's still pretty recent.
It's perfect synthesis of these newfangled ideas, American ideas, and an old religion being brought over the pond with them, and being slapped together.
Yeah, and I just find that sort of do you think it's that natural evolution for people to have religions evolve? Because that's kind of what we've been doing since people be people.
Well, I think there's lots of evolutionary reasons behind our religions. I don't think it's necessarily a given that we have to have a religion. We didn't start out that way, and we may not finish that way. Who knows? But there are definitely evolutionary ways, survival mechanisms that our brain has developed over time, and some of them foster religious very well. Some have been co-opted by religions very well.
So here's my other question. Do we need them?
Hashtag just saying, but yeah, I don't think we need to lie about, we don't need bad reasons to be good when there are already good reasons to be good.
Right.
What's Cosmic Kyle saying here? We're pattern-seeking storytelling animals. Yeah, absolutely. That is one of our evolutionary sweet spots. We love a good story.
like, it's kind of like, Joseph Campbell with the, the hero's journey. Like, Jesus is just a hero's journey story, and we've been telling these since we could sit around campfires and tell stories.
And some of these stories we can actually trace. Oh, this story came from this story. Oh, this story of Noah, that came from this story from Gilgamesh, and so on and so forth. And you just start seeing the same kind of things come and go and come and go.
Photos are interposed. What? I love my Star Trek references.
What does God need with a star?
Which is another hero's journey story. So, it's another, So it's all the same thing. Again,
the one who died for the many.
Same style, different dressing.
There you go. Yeah.
But it's like, and so did the Middle Eastern religions kind of birth out of Christianity? Because, like, don't they predate? Like, doesn't the Muslim religions and other?
You gotta keep reading this book. Oh my goodness!
I know. Well, like, I want like context, man. I have you. I'm gonna ask questions.
This little chunk of the Western religions over here. We haven't even touched on Islam. That's a whole other can of worms. But we haven't even gotten to the Eastern religions, and that's a whole other thing going on there. But
you have a half an hour. We can do
it. So they're blossoming out. All of our top 10 religions, not saying it's the oldest religion out there, but the mitochondrial eve of all of our big ticket religions now all seem to come from Persia and from the Iranian steppe area of Central Eurasia.
The Persians.
It turns out, and this you were talking about what kind of things surprised me when I set out to write this book. It totally shocked me that I knew that Zoroastrianism was like the granddaddy of Judaism, of Christianity, of Islam. I knew that. That's not even controversial. But what shocked me was early Proto-Zoroastrianism gave rise to early Buddhism and early Brahmanism. That gave rise to Hinduism. That gave rise to Buddhism. That gave rise to Taoism, Confucianism, and all the lot. And it's like, and they all start from like northwestern India, southeastern Iran, this chunk of the world that's so obscure kind of right now. And yet that's where all our big ticket religions today all came from, is right out of that movement, that area.
That's insane. That is insane. Like, if you think about it for just like 2 seconds, it's kind of crazy.
It's super crazy. So it blew my mind. Certainly blew my mind.
So
I always assumed Hinduism was like the oldest religion.
I thought Hinduism was.
Hinduism, and it's like, nope. Turns out it's not.
What's it?
Zoroastrianism.
Zoroastrianism, and is that out of Persia?
That's out of Persia. Yeah, kind of whole Persian realm, Persia, Media. Central Eurasia.
So how do we know that? I cannot say it again.
Zoroastrianism.
Zoroastrianism. Okay.
Yeah.
How do we know that is the old other than like Scott pointed out, like animism, and then
it's not the oldest, but all our big ticket religions, left and right, they trace directly back to that. It's not a evolutionary inevitability. It could have been.
Okay.
It just turns out that that's the wishing bone where the East and Western religions split off.
Oh, okay.
And there's like Australian Aborigines who got their own thing going. That had nothing to do.
Right. That's what. Because like
way far back. Yeah.
Like ancestor worship and
ancestor worship, animal worship, spirit worship. You name it. Any kind of animism you can think of. So
what do you think the cutoff? So speaking of animism, what was the cutoff where we stopped, thinking there was just some kind of spirited energy, like a very Taoist sort of perspective of versus, and then we started saying, like, instead of like, the cloud has a spirit, there's actually like a cloud god.
Right. Well, and it's kind of that thing about evolution. It's like, well, if we came from monkeys, how come there's still monkeys? It's like, well, if this religion came from animism, how come there's still animism? It's like all these things still exist in some forms or another around the world. A lot of what
I
we
just find
know.
it fascinating where like the cutoff was.
Yeah, I don't know if we can even pin down when the cutoff was.
I don't think so either, because people are weird.
But I can tell you when our top 10 religions started coming from, and that is in that area, what some historians like to call the axial age, and that's kind of a problematic definition, but it works not because of what the by accident. Cosmic Kyle saying, I like how Hinduism kind of sort of got the age of the universe in the ballpark for well, I mean, if you mean Hindu or Jainism, where it's like, oh, it's just bajillions and jillions of years. Yeah, I like the fact that they're clearly saying this has been around a long, long, long time. Their math goes out into crazy, older than the universe, but at least they're not saying it's 6,000 years old on a Tuesday, at 5.
Yeah, it's like what?
Yeah, it's not that ridiculous. Like, it's a different kind of ridiculous, but yeah, it's as you say, it's more closer to the ballpark. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I mean, like Carl Sagan has quoted Hinduism that it's the dream of the universe, or just experiencing it. And I was like, okay, I like the metaphor. Thank you, Carl Sagan. I appreciate that, but again, you can't prove it. So we could all be existing in some kind of weird AI alien dream where we're having a podcast and you and I exist and having a conversation.
What's funny about that thought is maybe we all live in the Matrix, but even if that were true, we'd still have to be good to each other. We'd still have to, treat each other with kindness. We
would still have to be kind and compassionate.
Yeah.
You have to.
What changes? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That was the whole thing about the rationalism and the good AI, but then they all became weird Sith lords. It's so fascinating.
It kind of reminds me of the whole thing. It's oh, the universe is so complex. It had to have had a creator. It couldn't just come out on its own. Well, where'd the creator come from? Oh, he's always existed. He just came out on his own. It's think about it.
What was he doing before the the millions and millions? When the universe came into the thing, because that came into thing.
The disconnect just never occurs to them. It's but
and then the universe will eventually die. It will, collapse in on itself. And then, so I was very high and watched a video of the death of the universe. And I was just
in 20 minutes. Yes. It blew my mind. Yeah. And it's we've got 3 trillion good years when there's going to be stars and existence, and
then everything's gone.
It's gone and gone. Yeah.
And then it's just well, then my life doesn't matter, but that's okay.
None of that matters right now. That's
no, right now I have to pay I have to eat and pay my pay my taxes. That's what I gotta do.
Dinosaurs on this planet, but that doesn't matter now. Now we're all mammals, and and we go. We live in the age of Starlight.
By the way, Kyle does really good space art, and you should buy it. I have 2 space art photographs coming from Kyle.
We live in the age of Starlight. I think that is fantastic.
Yeah, and I mean, and I really appreciate the fact that science can be and I'm using this terminology, a spiritual experience. When you recognize that you're part of a greater cosmos.
Humility, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because it's a psychological perspective. It's not, anything external, but it's nice. It's okay, I am part of the universe. I'm part of it. That's why I paganism was I was cool. That makes sense. But is there a cloud god? No, I don't think so.
Yeah,
I don't think so.
I kind of like any religion that takes the piss out of the dominant religion, which in our country is Christianity. So there's a part of me that loves rooting for Celtic pagans and things like that. But like you say, at the end of the day, no, if those guys wound up on top, they would be just as big dicks as any other religion out there, because they all tend to go wrong. Yeah,
they're all big dicks. And that's the thing, and I think that's also a product of our evolution, that there has to be some kind of dominant, because whenever you're just having a simple argument, which salad dressing is better, you want to be correct.
Right.
So take your salad dressing argument and apply it to a god.
The one true salad dressing. Yeah. It's funny you
Like
mentioned
that's.
that. I was gonna say,
No, keep going.
some of you know who Karis Prokowski is. She wrote a book called "Why Men Made God." She and I are working on a book right now talking about what religion has done to women over time, and
it sucks. Oh, he is frozen. Am I frozen? I hope not. Did we lose Dave? That is the question. Or is it me? I don't know. Oh yeah, we lost Dave. Okay. So we're gonna wait for Dave to his internet to return. Dave, I'm gonna hide. So we're gonna wait for Dave to. Okay, Dave's gonna come back. We're gonna have Dave come back. So we'll wait for that because that's what happens. That we started talking about the women's, and the algorithm was like, no, you can't talk about how bad religion's been to females. So yeah. Oh dear. Okay. Yeah. So I'm gonna send. He's probably rebooting. I should probably open my messenger. How'd that do? So yeah. Like I highlight, like, also Dave also signed all the copies of the books that he gave me because I was like, oh my god, your books are coming out, I will buy them. And he signed all my copies because he's an amazing human being. So buy them. It, like, again, highly recommend, and don't go by my slow reading as a fact of like to not read them. The ADHD is strong. So keep that in mind. I tend to get distracted. Like I've been going between this and then the new Hunger Games book, and then listening to podcasts about like weird sort of Harry Potter AI cults that cause people to murder other people. It's fascinating. So that's my life. Like it's just like I don't know what it is about like weird cult stuff that I like, but it tends to be a thing. Henceforth is my life. So we're gonna wait for Dave to come back. He has a link to the thing, so he's probably rebooting, or his internet is not kind. One or the other. So we will wait. And I will just talk into my camera about random stuff. Like it is really fascinating considering supporting Harry Potter sports. I'm not, but the thing is though, okay, like Jason, like it's a Harry Potter fanfic, which a trans woman started this weird sort of cult based on because the fanfic is Harry Potter and something rationalism, which is weird. And she started developing like this really weird cult, and it's so strange. Like, but also they're really into like pop culture and like the Ricky Gervais part of The Office, and I can't describe it because it's such a weird road, but I highly recommend you listen to the podcast because I was like, dude. Okay, I love how David Schwartz says T-Pow. It's like, yes. Oh my God, yes. Oh my goodness, the Scientology, man. Oh, by the way, speaking of the cult thing I was talking about with the weird Zeniums, it's Behind the Bastards. I will send you a link. I love it. This is I'm going to tell you, like, Behind the Bastards is probably one of my favorite podcasts, and I will send you a link to their YouTube channel. I highly recommend. They've done all types of stuff on cults and other terrible people. They did a whole like 6-part series on Hoover. It was fascinating. So I'll send you a link. It is so good. Sorry, I'm promoting a podcast, not a sponsor. Like, I just love it. It's one of those things that I listen to. I'm like, this is so weird. Oh, it's the Zizians, which is the weird how a Harry Potter fanfic inspired a cult. It is fascinating. So watch that. I'll put a link in the thing. So sorry, I was killing time talking about this weird cult.
Sorry about that. So, where did you lose me? I was in the middle of saying something brilliant.
Chad, help! I don't remember.
Yeah,
I don't remember. Hold on. Actually, hold on. I can probably go back. Will it trigger me to remember? No.
Death.
No, though. Okay, so we were kind of laughing that you described Mormonism as the steampunk of Scientology, which I find hilarious and great. Because it's a trip. Like Mormonism, I have friends that were Mormons when I was growing up, but like I didn't go to temple or any, like we were just buds,
right?
You know, because I was a woman in religion. Thank you, Melanie. So you're working on the book.
Yes. Thank you, Melanie.
Okay, thank you, Melanie. Melanie, you're the other part of our brain. Great job. Okay, so talk about that.
Gotcha. Oh, yeah, Karis Burkowski, who wrote "Why Men Made God," talking about women and religion. She and I are working on a new book now. We're still titled to be determined, but it's all going to be about how religion has done a number on women through the ages and what can be done about it. So,
because it's terrible.
What's that?
It's always terrible.
Yeah,
it's always terrible. It's terrible now because of religion.
And which is ironic because in a lot of cultures, the women are like the faith. They bear the faith and they carry it, and they're the ones that keep it going. You know.
Well, like the old matriarch religions were like back in like, you know, and when people didn't understand how life and death work, they just understood like women gave birth and they didn't understand the whole biological process behind it.
Right.
And then so there was like it was considered like a miracle, and then like this being that which is great risk because a lot of women died like giving birth.
Yeah.
You know, and then, you know, and that's why we have, you know, mother goddesses and death goddesses, because they were linked to the cycle of life and death and things like that.
Yeah.
So it's, and now it's like,
yeah.
And now we're the ills because of feminism, and then I don't know, men. Like what men do.
You know,
what do you do?
Not men. Yeah. Exactly.
Not men. And we're just like, we just want to be treated like people and have rights.
This is the thing.
And that's all.
The radical notion that they're more than just a doormat. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I knew it is.
When women were dragons.
Nice. But so like, okay, so here's a question.
Yeah.
Why have, like, doing your research, why in a lot of religions there has to be some kind of antagonist? Like, because it tends to be a theme.
You know, it's funny because again, even in Judaism, it wasn't always that way, and in Christianity, but it sort of goes hand in hand with the thought of an afterlife, like the idea that there was a good afterlife for good people and a bad afterlife for bad people. That was not originally part of the thing at all. In early Judaism, we shouldn't even call it Judaism. In early, you know, religions of Israel and Judah, everybody went to the same place with good, bad. Once you're dead, you all wound up in a big gloomy underworld called Sheol. And it wasn't until a Persian that the idea of a paradise is a Persian word, in fact, that we got directly from Zoroastrianism. The idea that there was a good God and a bad God, and you had to decide, are you going to fight for the good God or are you going to fight for the bad God? And in a way that's dualism, but in a sense it's really monotheism, because everybody knew the good God was going to win out at the end. You know, everybody knew that. Just like the devil. In all the ways it counts, it was really a monotheism. And you can see there's all these different religious ideas, like a good afterlife for good people and a bad afterlife for bad people, that we got directly from Zoroastrianism. No question about it. Not even all that controversial to say that. But the twist that they put on it in Judaism and Christianity, well, for instance, Satan. In Judaism, you didn't have a guy named Satan, an evil dude. You had Hasatan, you had the adversary, and he was just one more of God's servants. God created evil, God created good. He did all that. In Zoroastrianism, you had a good God who did the good things and a bad God who did the bad things. In Judaism, no. Our God, Yahweh, he does all the things. Good, bad, it's all on him. As that verse in Isaiah talks about. That was their response to Zoroastrianism. It's like, no, he's the head honcho of everything. Satan wasn't his adversary, or he was his employee, not his opponent. And then in Christianity, they took the snake from the Garden of Eden. They took this poem about a guy, Lucifer, who's who's fallen from heaven. It was a political satire about this one particular king dude. And they put all these things. And
God, that's fascinating.
They created.
That's why Dante's Inferno is a fanfic.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. And it's just that's how religions evolve. These patchwork quilts of all these things that came before it, and they seem like they're
insane.
Yeah, they seem like there's big monoliths until you start checking where the roots go, and where these.
That's really fascinating because that makes more sense of why like when we're having the discussion of the problem of evil, like why would God create his own adversary? Like why would you like I can understand creating an imaginary friend, creating a friend, but like why would you create your own enemy? Like why? Like that doesn't make any sense. But now when you play it that way, it's like that makes way more sense. He's a middle management guy.
If you have a good God who's all good and a bad God who's all bad, it's obvious whose side you should be on. You should be on the good guys. But when you have a God who's supposedly in charge of everything and everything was created by him, it makes no sense that there's evil in the first place, which ironically wasn't a problem that the earliest religions had. It's like because they believed in gods, but they didn't believe their gods were perfect or omni this or omni that, all powerful or all wise or omniscient. They were just bigger than we are, So you didn't have a problem with evil until you get the idea that, our God is a super duper God who's super bigger above everything, and yet he can't scribes from fucking up his scripture. He can't keep, his omnipotent hands are tied. Free will. He wants us to have free will for some reason,
but also doesn't want us to have free will, which is confusing.
Angels don't have free will, and yet somehow there's a civil war in heaven. It's like, come on, get your story straight, people. Yeah, it makes no damn sense.
Because there's too many logical fallacies that fall down. I had a guy tell me literally. So every Tuesday night I do a TikTok for the atheist community of Austin, and I do lives, and I've been doing it for over a year. It's really fun, and I had. Some guy told me a few weeks ago that the inconsistencies in the Bible make it true. And that was, and I'm like, that's not,
I love how that works.
How truth works.
It's clearly eyewitness testimony because it's, they say completely different things. It's,
what's what is one of the most dismissible things in court is eyewitness testimony, so because our memories are flawed, and so it was one of those things.
Not that the Gospels even claim to be eyewitnesses.
No.
Very clear. This is the story handed down to their generation. But anyway, don't get me started.
I know it's just. Well, and that's the thing, when you're looking at the actual history of how things evolve, and this is based on human motivation and human emotion, and it has nothing to do with divinity, which is
with evolution and marketability. Because let's face it, a gloomy underworld where bad guys and good guys go, that doesn't sell as well as a good heaven and a bad hell. That's a much more sexy idea. It's like, I want to go to that one. Yeah.
But also too, and this is the problem like, this is my quibble, is that, I don't really like the idea because who gets in, who gets out, that's always debatable,
Right.
like why murder and have sex before marriage?
Right.
Why? That's
Right.
confusing. But that was my first question when I was in CCD class. I was like, excuse me. I was like, why sex before marriage and murder the same?
Yes.
Why? And my CCD teacher, because God said it so. And I'm like, yeah, I know God said it, but why?
Oh, you are my favorite kind of student to have in Sunday school class.
I'm like
Yeah.
why?
Because yep. Because God said it. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's not a good answer. That's like,
If
even
God
if you're a
told you to
parent,
jump off a cliff, would you do it? Yeah, you would.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. Well, there you go. That makes perfect sense. Yeah. So I'm gonna finish your books, and then I'm gonna have you back on so we can have a more conversation when I have read the book. And then by that time, maybe your new book will be out, and then I will delay reading that. So,
yeah.
Because the ADHD is strong. Like I'm between reading your book, the new Hunger Games book.
Oh, fun.
And which is really good. And also listening to podcasts about weird cults.
So there you go. You got your work cut out for you.
Well, yeah, that's maybe, all. Like,
I'm still hoping to get the sex and violence book out. Since I've written
a link to, I did put the link for that in the doobly doo, but I'll put it in there again.
Thank you. And I was going to say, the fun thing is, since I've written this book, I'm going to have to rewrite a bunch of things I wrote for the sex and violence. So it's like all this stuff about David and Jonathan. And it's like, oh, and by the way, none of these guys probably existed. So,
and there's no sex and violence according to Bush. So.
Oh, that's adorable. That's adorable.
I know. Like, I'm a 90s child. So I listened to a lot of Bush and stuff in the 90s. So that's where that came from. Thank you. The goth in me is never going to die. I'll tell you that right now. Okay, so tell the people where to go. Like, I put the link in the doobly doo, but tell people where to find you and do the things. Like,
I mean, in theory, I've got a website.
Pimp yourself, man.
In theory, I've got a website, davefitzgerald.org. But by far the best way to get a hold of me is through Facebook or on email through everybodylovesdave@gmail.com. And if anybody has questions, I'm happy to answer. Why Photon is your soul? Why is the North Pole Santa's workshop? I don't know.
No. Okay, so do things. I'm gonna finish Jake's book, and he'll be back when I finish all 3 books. So we're gonna have a more in-depth conversation than the first half of the book.
Honestly, I think it'd be brilliant, considering you've just read 1/6 of the new book. So yeah,
I'm halfway through. I'm making my way through. Because I am fascinated, but the ADHD is strong.
I get it. But let me just say, there is mind-blowing stuff in every single one of those books. And I
was mind blown by like people trying to figure out how toothaches happen because of turtle shell. I was like, that's a trip. that was a trip. I was like, and I read it 3 times because I was just like, wait, let me read that again. And then I read it out loud to my husband.
Yeah. Too funny.
So it's a trip. It's funny. Like, and it's very easily digestible. Like,
Thank you.
Yeah, that's one thing I really appreciate. Like explaining to me like I'm 5. Like, I like that
balance between making it
like
fun.
I feel smarter. Yeah, but I also explain it to me like I'm 5 years old.
Exactly. So. And not dumbing it down, but not making it too impossible. Yeah.
So all 3 books, everybody. So I have them right next to me. Okay, so the first one is Volume 1, The Evolution of God and the Gods of Monotheism. So that's the first book.
Yeah.
The second book is Volume 2, Judaism and Christianity. So that's the second book. If my camera will be nice to me. So there's that. And then the third book is Islam and the Eastern religions. So which I'm actually really excited to read because I don't know a lot about Eastern religions because I'm white and I live in the United States, and I'm not a biblical scholar. So I'm actually really, really excited to read this one. But I'm gonna save the best for last. So,
there you go.
Because them's the rules.
Honestly, the
stuff on Islam, order.
The stuff on Islam will blow your mind. It's like it sure.
I'm so excited. Like so buy the books, everybody.
Yay!
Buy all the things. Yeah, buy Nailed. I haven't bought Nailed yet.
And for those who are waiting for the audiobooks to come out, we've finished recording audio. The book number 1, it's in the can. It's just being. I don't know when it's going to come out, but probably maybe as early as this month. That's the sound engineer's call. It's being edited right now, but they're all going to be made into audiobooks down the line. But book 1 should be out very, very soon. Knock on wood.
Okay. Wow.
I did not know that. I'd be interesting to know how you know that, or how anyone could know that. But anyway, we'll talk about that.
Something, quantum entanglement, something.
Exactly.
Navi, you did say quantum, so you know that's how you know. That's the new trigger word. Instead of God, you say quantum.
Yeah, God is love, God is light, or maybe love is love and light is light. And
light.
Do we have souls? I don't know if we do have souls. I know we have brains. Some of us use more of it than others.
Funny story. So the same person that told me that the inconsistencies in the Bible make it true, which I was just like, that's new. I've never had someone say that to me before.
Yeah.
I was like, what's a soul? And he goes, well, it's the part of you that makes you you. And I go, but that's my brain. That's brain development. Yeah. And he goes, no, the stuff that's really, really you. And I'm like, but what me? Like when I was 5, or
the invisible, not touching the stuff that can be touched or sensed or detected. But but it's really
me. Yes. I'm like, what's me? Because I change all the time. So what? And then he's like, your essence, and I'm like, so the stuff that's distracted by the dark crystal. Like what are you talking about?
Yeah. It's adorable.
It's very abstract. But basically, it's just like say word, insert definition.
Exactly. And you know what? That never would have flown like a few hundred years ago. It's like
really?
We don't get these wibbly wobbly, timey wimey sort of gods until they start getting defined out of existence. Because the more we see where how the sausage is made, the more you can say, well, he's not, a god of the mountains. He's not a god of the plains. He's a super duper god above it all.
He is the super duper god. He's such a super god that he's so mysterious that he can't be explained. And then they go, well,
he's so patient. It's like he's not there at all. Yep, exactly.
My major thing is it's Bob the Wonder Chose. You can worship Bob the Wonder Chose. That's because my friend did an experiment in high school where they had a god called Bob the Wonder Chose, and they and everybody prayed to Bob the Wonder Chose, and they would write prayers down like what you do with religion, and there's a 50-50 chance that things were going to you're going to be blessed by Bob the Wonder Toast because he toasted for your sins. so they would toasted. He toasted for your sins.
Gotcha.
So
the bread of life.
They would pray to. This was an experiment of how religion works. That we're just going to have Bob the Wonder Toast, and again, and it was the same thing where there's a 50-50 chance that you're going to be okay, and then if Bob the Wonder Toast did not grant you your wish, you would have to come up with a post hoc explanation of why.
Not faith in the toast.
You didn't have faith in the toast, and it was it was basically an experiment on how to explain how religions.
Sometimes Bob says no to your prayers.
Sometimes Bob says no.
Your arms too short to box with Bob, my friend. Yeah.
Well, it's the same thing like when I was a witch and I was in paganism, that like if you didn't do your spell correctly, or the universe has other plans for you, there's always a post hoc explanation for bullshit.
Yeah.
So
always something.
All right. Yeah. Okay. So everybody, so this coming, let me put my calendar. So Sydney Plaza is going to be on this Saturday because I make special exceptions if you live outside the United States. Nice. I have to. Right. So she's going to be on this coming Saturday at 7 p.m. talking about rational thinking. My friend Dan's going to be on next Monday, and we're going to talk about how labels don't serve us. So we're going to do that on Monday at 7 p.m. And then next Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern, Ethan Michael, your friendly neighborhood atheist, is going to be on, and we're going to talk about community building. So nice. That's going to happen. So I like, this is the thing now that I'm becoming like, I know too many people, so I gotta fit everybody in. Yep. So if you want to be on the show, email me here. Also, I have rules. Like, I have one guy, like, free thinking, cool. Yeah. Too much free thinking, it's a problem. I had a guy, I was like, you're too much of a free thinker, because
he's so open-minded. He was just like,
the brain fell out because
Bob the Wonder Toast.
Bob the Wonder Toast was like,
yeah.
It was.
I'd have corners.
I asked. He had like this. I don't remember. It was a very weird sort of like quantum science sort of like explain reality kind of thing, and I was like, do you have citations and work that you've actually done? And he goes, well, it hasn't been accepted by the scientific community. And I was like, okay.
Yeah
not for my show, but I appreciate you stopping by. So that's coming up. So but if you want to be on, or you know someone that wants to be on, have them email me. I do make exceptions for Monday. But I am booked into almost the end of June right now. So I am I know. I'm just,
you got
I'm
legs,
excited.
baby. You're all over the place.
I do. I'm like, because I've socialized enough in the past 4 years. Nice. So, all right. So, David, thank you so much for coming on. Like I said, I'm going to finish all 3 books, and then I'm going to book you back on, and then we can talk about your new book, which that one I'm actually very excited about, because as a feminist, I'm all down for it. Okay, everybody, like, subscribe, do all the things. Go to Dave's website. Please buy these books. They're actually, even though I've only halfway through the first one, I'm actually really enjoying the read. Just the ADHD is strong. Anyway, everybody, have a good night. Be kind, be compassionate, stay skeptical, and I will see you all on Saturday. Bye, people.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.